The NFL draft is right around the corner, and it is time for another mock draft. And let's get right into it. With the first overall pick, the Chicago Bears select Caleb Williams, quarterback out of USC. And it has been a foregone conclusion ever since the Bears traded Justin Fields to the Steelers that Caleb Williams will be the pick here at number one. This is where things start to get a little bit interesting. With the second pick, the Commanders, there's no doubt they will be drafting a quarterback after trading Sam Howell to the Seahawks. But is it going to be Drake May or Jaden Daniels? I'm actually leaning towards them selecting Jaden Daniels, quarterback out of LSU, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. And Jaden Daniels, he has displayed more running ability than Drake May has throughout his career. And based off of one of Kingsbury's press conferences saying that you need to have a quarterback that can be mobile when the game is on the line in crunch time, at least something to that extent. And I do think that it fit the mold for them selecting Jaden Daniels. I feel like that is also a foregone conclusion. And many people think that it's a foregone conclusion that the Patriots will select Drake May, quarterback out of North Carolina. But I actually think the Patriots go in a completely different direction. Not JJ McCarthy, but a wide receiver. I think they select Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver out of Ohio State. And I feel like Gerard Mayo, with him being a brand new head coach, his first time being a head coach, the best way to stick around longer, in my opinion, is to get the best players you possibly can. And the Patriots, they have a lot more issues than a quarterback. In fact, I'll be honest, I think Bailey Zappi has at least shown that he has the ability to be a starter in the NFL. Do I think he is the long-term solution for the Patriots? No. But I do think the Patriots do gamble on Bo Nix or Michael Penix Jr. falling in the second round and take Marvin Harrison Jr., the safest pick in this draft class, in my opinion. In fact, on if I did do a big board, Marvin Harrison Jr. would be number one because I find him the safest pick in this entire draft. Pick number four, the Arizona Cardinals, and this is where we have our first trade of the draft. The Arizona Cardinals trade the fourth overall pick to the Minnesota Vikings. And there was a reason why the Vikings, they got an extra first round pick to ensure that they can get a quarterback in this draft after Kirk Cousins left for free agency, as the Vikings are, in my opinion, one of close to maybe a dozen teams that have questions at quarterback going into the 2024 season. And that's not exactly the trade I think that would actually go down. I do think that those two first round picks the Vikings have, pick 11 and pick 23, will be involved in that trade. But I don't know about the other picks. But the Vikings, they select Drake May, quarterback out of North Carolina. As the Vikings, they get the quarterback of their future. I think even if Kirk Cousins was still a Viking, I do think if one of the quarterbacks fell to pick 11, whether it had been JJ McCarthy or even Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., as we truly don't know where the quarterbacks are going to be taken. And there are reports that Michael Penix Jr. could be selected in the top 12 somehow, or towards the bottom of the first round, early second round. Nobody truly knows the quarterback situation. As days before the draft last year, there are rumors that the Texans had interest in Will Levis with the second overall pick, and he ended up falling to the second round. And everybody is expecting the first three picks to be a variation of Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May. But I actually do think Drake May falls to 4, and the Patriots, they pass on Drake May and take Marvin Harrison Jr., which is why I have it set up right now the way that it is set up. Next up, the Chargers select Malik Nabers, wide receiver, LSU. As Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are no longer on the team, they need a number one option, someone to pair up with Quentin Johnston. Quentin Johnston, he hasn't shown his full potential yet compared to other receivers that in the past that have shown their potential immediately. So I think they go with Malik Nabers out of LSU. If they still had Keenan Allen or Mike Williams, I do think it's possible we would see him take Brock Bowers, but I think the pick is Malik Nabers territory. Pick number 6, a lot of people think the Giants will select JJ McCarthy, but I actually think they'll select Rome Odunze, wide receiver of Washington. Because if you look at the Giants receiving room, it is absolutely horrendous. It is perhaps the worst receiving core in the National Football League, and they need a number one guy. And I think Rome Odunze, I think he can fit that bill pretty easily with the Giants. As Jalen Hyatt hasn't reached his full potential yet, and I do kind of get that as he was dealing with injuries throughout the year last season. Plus, the Giants, they have Daniel Jones at a massive contract. So I think if they were going to take a quarterback at some point in this draft, it would be round 2 if one of the 5, 6 quarterbacks that are being talked about happen to fall in that second round, or they take a Michael Pratt or a Spencer Rattler later on in the draft. Pick number 7, the Titans. I think they go offensive tackle, and I think they go Oli Fashanu out of Penn State. The Titans, they improve their offensive line. I know offensive line isn't always an exciting pick, but we have seen in the past how important a good offensive line is. Pick number 8, the Falcons. They have spent their last 3 first round picks on offense. They improved their defense to go with Dallas Turner, edge rusher out of Alabama. Pick number 9, the Bears. They go with Joe Alt, offensive tackle out of Notre Dame. And again, just like the Titans, I know offensive line isn't necessarily exciting, but it is important. And I would not be surprised if the pick was Jared Verse in the situation, or if the Falcons passed on Dallas Turner, it'd be Dallas Turner. But I think with Joe Alt to make the offensive line better, especially with the hype that Caleb Williams has been getting as a generational talent, you have to protect him at all cost. So there's no shame here for the Bears taking Joe Alt with the 9th overall pick. Pick number 10. This does feel like an obvious pick, but it may not be to some. Aaron Rodgers loves his tight ends, and they go with Brock Bowers, tight end out of Georgia. The second safest pick in this draft, in my opinion, Marvin Harrison Jr., Brock Bowers. They are my top 2 on my big board. Pick number 11, the Arizona Cardinals are on the clock until we have another trade. The Cardinals trade the 11th pick to the Raiders, as Antonio Pierce, he did say in a press conference early in the offseason that they will be prioritizing a quarterback in the draft. And coincidentally, a division rival is right in front of them at pick 12. So the Raiders move up to pick 11. And they select J.J. McCarthy, quarterback out of Michigan. J.J. McCarthy coming off of a national championship with Michigan, as he only lost 1 game as a starter at Michigan, and that was the playoff game against TCU, in a game where I felt like Michigan beat themselves in that game, and it wasn't. necessarily all on JJ McCarthy that day. But I do think the Raiders, they play it safe in case the Broncos were looking at JJ McCarthy. But I do think with the 12th pick, with JJ McCarthy off the board, the Broncos, they select Bo Nix, quarterback out of Oregon. As those two teams, the Raiders and Broncos, they get their hopefully franchise quarterbacks. And I've seen a lot of mock drafts where the Broncos don't necessarily go QB, but or even the Raiders going quarterback. But I don't think it makes sense for people to think that the Raiders are willing to have QB1 in 2024 be either Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew, even though Gardner Minshew's had a couple of positive moments in the NFL. And I don't think it would make sense for the Broncos to want to go with Jarrett Stidham as QB1 going to 2024. They take Bo Nix. Pick number 13, the Cardinals are finally on the clock, and they go with Quinyon Mitchell, cornerback out of Toledo. I was really impressed with his performance at the Combine last month, and I do think he has the case for being a future lockdown corner in the league. And I do think if Quinyon Mitchell, if he did go to one of the big time schools like Alabama or even Clemson or Georgia, he would be the top corner off the board. But I do think him being the first corner off the board does become a reality. I think it easily could. As the Cardinals now with their trades, they do have 3 first-round picks to work with. As the Cardinals, if they do indeed trade out of the 4th pick, they could be the big winners of the draft after round 1. And the rest of the draft wouldn't matter. They'd be big winners if they filled in the gaps they need to fill. Pick number 14. This may be a controversial pick, but I think the Saints go with Laiatu Latu, edge rusher out of UCLA. And I know that Jared Verse is a little bit better than Latu, according to some, maybe to most. But a lot of times we don't always see the best prospects on the board get taken at certain points. And there are some surprises. And I think this could be a surprise right here. Pick number 15, the Colts, they think they improved their secondary and go with Terrion Arnold out of Alabama. As this is a improvement to their secondary for the Colts. Although I was really tempted on having him draft Brian Thomas Jr. in this draft. Pick number 16, the Seahawks. I think they also pass on Jared Verse, as Jared Verse would be, I think, a wonderful fit in Seattle. I think Seattle looks to improve their offensive line and go with Jackson Powers Johnson out of Oregon. As the Seahawks, they improve their offensive line that has been shaky over the years. Pick number 17, the Jaguars. And I'm sure everyone expects me to go corner, Nate Wiggins or Cooper DeJean or Kool-Aid McKinstry. But with Calvin Ridley no longer on the Jaguars, they got to find a number 1 guy. And I think they go with Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver, LSU, to give Trevor Lawrence a number 1 guy. Pick number 18, the Bengals. They finally invest in their offensive line, and they go with Talise Fauga out of Oregon State. As we have seen Joe Burrow have 2 season-ending injuries already in his career. I believe he's only had 4 seasons as an NFL starter. He's had a season-ending injury in 2 of them. So I think the Bengals go Fauga. Pick number 19, the Rams. They go with Jared Verse out of Florida State. Not only is this best player available mentality, but a good replacement for Aaron Donald, in my opinion. As Aaron Donald recently announced retirement. Pick number 20, the Steelers, they, for the second year in a row, go offensive tackle, and they go with Amarius Mims, offensive tackle out of Georgia. They took Broderick Jones, also out of Georgia last year in the first round, and I think they improved their offensive line. Pick number 21, I think another offensive tackle is off the board. Troy Fontenot out of Washington. As we saw Tua really struggle a little bit last season, he did have some good moments, but I think the Dolphins, they need to improve their offensive line a little bit, considering how close Tua has been in the past with his concussion history. Protect him at all costs. As if the Dolphins happen to be one and done in the playoffs, I really do think there's going to be a lot of questions about Tua moving forward. Pick 22, the Eagles, they take another Georgia player. They go with Kamari Lassiter, cornerback out of Georgia, passing on Wiggins, DeJean, and McKinstry. As the Eagles, they've had success with Georgia players in the past in recent history. Pick number 23, the Cardinals go with Byron Murphy, defensive lineman out of Texas. The Cardinals are starting things off. They're starting the draft by improving their defense, as Jonathan Gannon is a defensive guy. So I think that is their strategy right now moving forward. Pick 24, I will be honest, I was in between on them going with J.C. Latham, offensive tackle out of Alabama, or Adonai Mitchell, wide receiver out of Texas. But I do think that the Cowboys, I think it is in their best interest to get a strong wide receiver too to pair up with CeeDee Lamb. So I think they go with Adonai Mitchell, wide receiver out of Texas. And we saw Adonai Mitchell really start to propel as the wide receiver one for Texas last season. As going into 2023, Xavier Worthy was the wide receiver one, but we saw AD Mitchell really take over as the top target for Quinn Ewers. So I think the Cowboys, they get a compliment to CeeDee Lamb. Pick number 25, the Packers, they go with Kool-Aid McKinstry, cornerback, Alabama. As the Packers, they improve their secondary. Pick number 26, and we have another trade. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they trade with the Ravens. And we see the Ravens select Keon Coleman, wide receiver out of Florida State. As a wide receiver is one of the top priorities for the Ravens, even though they did draft Zay Flowers last season in the first round. Keon Coleman is an absolute monster, and they need a massive presence in the receiving corps. Pick number 27, I think we're going to see a run of wide receivers off the board right here. The Cardinals, they select Troy Franklin, wide receiver out of Oregon. They lost Hollywood Brown in free agency as they needed a number one guy. As much as I am a fan of Michael Wilson and I'm rooting for him, as I do get Amon-Ra St. Brown vibes out of Michael Wilson, I do think the Cardinals are playing it safe to see if Troy Franklin or even Xavier Legette establish themselves as the wide receiver one in Arizona. And I think they select Troy Franklin with the 27th pick. Pick number 28, the Bills, they get a compliment to Stephon Diggs, perhaps even a future wide receiver one status, as Stephon Diggs is getting older by the year as the years go along. They take Xavier Legette, wide receiver out of South Carolina. And I would not be surprised if Xavier Legette, if he had a better start to his career than most of these wide receivers off the board. Long term, I'd not be surprised if he was one of the best in the class. Pick number 29, the Detroit Lions, they take what I think is an obvious Dan Campbell blue collar pick, Cooper DeJean, cornerback out of Iowa. As the Lions, they improved their secondary as their pass defense was not the strongest in the league by any means, especially in the playoffs. And they select Cooper DeJean. Pick number 30, the Buccaneers, they select Chop Robinson, edge rusher out of Penn State. And I felt like early in the draft process, Chop Robinson, as he felt like a top 20 pick to me, maybe as high as top 15, depending on how the draft was starting to shake out. But I think Chop Robinson falling towards the end of the first, and I think would be ideal on draft night. Pick number 31, the 49ers, they select J.C. Latham, offensive tackle, Alabama. As the 49ers, they improve their offensive line. And the final pick of the first round, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Super Bowl champions. I think a lot of people would expect them to take a receiver, Xavier Worthy, Ladd McConkey, even Roman Wilson, I could see being the pick, but I think they go in a different direction. I think with the fact that they signed Hollywood Brown and with how stacked the wide receiver class is in later rounds, Ricky Pearsall out of Florida, Jalen Polk, Malachi Corley, who I think is a lot of people's sleeper, Tez Walker, North Carolina, Jalen McMillan, Jermaine Burton, Brendan Rice, just name a few. I think they find a replace for Jarius Sneed, and that is Nate Wiggins out of Clemson. And that will do it for my latest NFL mock draft. Comment your thoughts down below. Also, like and share. And until next time, have a good one.